When Donald Trump won the 2016 election, the political world was shocked. He ran on a campaign to drain the swamp, to change the ways in which Washington works. Just as President Obama in 2008 and 2012 used Twitter to get information out during his campaigns, Donald Trump has used Twitter to directly impact the political process. He has over 51 million Twitter followers now. Here are some of the tweets that have directly impacted the political process itself. The youth are at the forefront of social media and politics, and we wanted to get their honest opinions on how they think that Trump's tweets have affected the political process. Let's check out our focus group. All right, thank you everyone for coming. So we're doing a focus group on Trump's tweets and how it affects the political process. Riley's going to ask you some questions that we've come up with, and we're going to hope to get some response to an unproductive discussion.
Go.
All right, so have you all seen Trump's tweets?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you believe his tweets are negative or positive overall?
I'd probably say more negative, but I think a lot of his tweets are just what he's thinking at the time. So
I think oftentimes it's what the people don't need in that moment. I think he picks and chooses delicate moments to say brash things that may or may not be necessarily positive or negative, but they're just not right for the moment.
Yeah, I don't know if his tweets are necessarily positive or negative. I think it has to do with in which way you view his tweets and which way you lean in your political standing. I do think his tweets are impulsive, though. I feel like he, if he ever feels attacked or if he ever feels the need to get a message out to the public, Twitter is a great platform for him to do that because, it's a social networking platform where he's unopposed. You don't have to answer questions from the press, you don't have to answer questions from people, just pretty much ignore all your replies. So it's just easy for him to just spew anything he wants without virtually being unopposed.
So our government is comprised of 3 equal branches with checks and balances to make sure that not one becomes more powerful. Do you feel like the tweets like this show that the president is trying to have more power than the other 2 branches and undermine them in the political process?
I don't feel like it's undermining the other 2 branches. I just, like I said before, I think it's just an impulsive decision on his part. I think the legislative branch still has their power. I think the judicial branch still has their power. The president, obviously the head of the executive branch, is just doing something that's a part of his everyday life that he feels is necessary.
In the same way that giving an interview wouldn't take away from the legislative branch's ability to enforce the law, I feel like his tweets aren't inhibiting the other branch's ability to do their job. I just think it might be exaggerating one side, but it's not taking away from other sides.
Exactly, totally agree.
yeah, and I think just to add to that, I agree with both of those points. I think that the problem comes with a lot of people view him as a leader. And so I don't think he interferes with the other branches, but how he treats them is definitely important on people's perception of American politics.
Do you think that the tweets from Trump undermine the authority of the office of the president currently and in the future? What does that even mean?
No, it's a tough question. It's a tough question, but I feel like it might because obviously the White House has a press secretary and she makes statements all the time, but oftentimes it feels like she's making statements defending his statements that he makes publicly on Twitter. So sometimes the tweets seem counterintuitive to what the White House is trying to do because they feel like they're constantly have to defend what is being said on Twitter. So yeah, I can be convinced that it undermines the White House a little bit in their decision-making process.
I think having a president share such impulsive tweets and such tweets that are oftentimes taken in bad taste has a negative impact on the way that we view him as a person, but not necessarily how we view the office of the president going forward. I think if they're, in the next election, if someone that, generally was considered very, very acceptable president, what Trump has done with his tweets is not going to make it less of an effective presidency going forward, if that's what the question was.
But think at the same time too, there's a huge population of America that likes a president who's on Twitter, because it kind of shows that, he's just a regular person too, and his voice, deserves to be as heard as much as the next person. So I think that people really, really like that aspect of Trump, that he's very open and vocal in his thoughts and beliefs.
Yeah.
Very true too.
Do you think Trump's tweets get people into gear and can become more productive?
Into gear?
Like put them in their place, or make things happen. For instance, like Trump's tweets about firing certain individuals or making them resign, etc.
I think the Trump campaign from the very beginning was unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that before. The way that he spoke, the things that he was saying and what he was doing. I think his use of Twitter is an example of that too, because we haven't really had a president ever do what he's doing on Twitter before. So I feel like it has an impact on the people that listen, because on Twitter, when he releases a statement on Twitter, there's not a second thought out there that conflicts. There's nobody playing devil's advocate. It's his message, and obviously you have replies, people who quote the tweets, but those get muffled under blue check marks and other people. So I think yes, it can have an impact and it can get people into gear. And definitely the people that support him more. I feel like the people who don't necessarily support him and have an opposite view, I feel like he can do the opposite. I feel like he can kind of turn them off, say, why is he doing this? This is unprofessional. This is not what I want in a president. But I feel like his supporters say yes. That's why we elected him. We want him to take charge. We love this attitude. All those things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more people involved with politics now than there was during the Obama administration, and I think that's definitely a good thing. But at the same time, there's a lot more divisiveness, and I don't think that necessarily comes from Trump's tweets. I think that's more of the current political climate, but it certainly doesn't help, mitigate that divide, I don't think. So.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about a lot in class is this development of new technologies and how the government and everything responds to it. So this is a quote from a newspaper article. It says, "He's a salesman, and a salesman's number one technique is to keep the attention on him and frame what the conversation is and control what is being discussed. Twitter is perfect. It allows him to get ahead of the news agenda. Although Twitter was around in the 70s, that performance was already in place." So do you agree that Twitter now is the best platform for Trump to communicate with people now that we're in this big social media age, or do you think that there's another way to go about it?
I would say two things. One, I would say Twitter is not the place for someone in the office of the presidency. I don't believe that the person in the Oval Office should be communicating through a social media app, spontaneously sending out messages that can have major implications for the entire status of the world. Do I think it's effective? Yeah. I mean, if you look at his follower count, if you look at how quickly people take on to the things that he said and how quickly his tweets show up on all the news outlets, obviously it's doing a job, but I think it's one of the least professional displays we've seen out of the Oval Office as far as just a general theme of his behavior. Regardless of whether you agree with the content, I don't feel like consistent messages coming from Twitter is intelligent.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the best platform. I really can't think of another alternative that he'd use in this day and age, the way social media is going. I mean, I'm all for progressiveness. I recognize and acknowledge that social media is having an impact on everyday society and millennials and even the older generation too. It's really swept not only this nation but the world by storm. All other countries are using social media to stay connected. So that's his stance. That's his thing that he's doing, and I really have no clue if it's the best or not.
Yeah, I don't think it should be the only means of communication. And I think what Mark was saying about the language and professionalism on that Twitter account is also super important too.
Yeah.
But if that's the way that Trump feels like he can communicate with the American people best, I wouldn't discourage him from using it as long as it's professional.
Yeah.
Really,
Professionalism is big. If you're going to be misspelling words and
Yeah.
using erratic punctuation and just off the cuff, I don't think it's.
Yeah,
it's
I
right.
did miss that point. I did mean to say that I acknowledge it's progressive and that other presidents may do it in the future, but the way that he personally goes about it, I
Yeah.
think is a little unprofessional.
Yeah.
I don't think his tweets are checked. as much as other presidents may have done in the past.
Yeah. No, and I like
So
what
that
you
part
said.
I don't like. But as
Yeah.
far as, you know, going forward and what is the best way to communicate with your voters and the people of America, maybe maybe Twitter is the best one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
I like what you say about progressive, but
Mhm.
I just there's boundaries, there's
Absolutely.
rules, there's rules.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to read you a tweet by President Trump. This was December 21st, 2015, so before in office, but right around election time. A suicide bomber just killed U.S. troops in Afghanistan. When will our leaders get tough and smart? We are being led to slaughter. So there was over 5,000 people talking about this. This tweet can show how he encourages responses on attacks, and that's Congress's realm when talking about getting into wars. He does call out military personnel here. Do you feel like this tweet in particular can undermine the political process of, hey, that's up to Congress to decide what to do with wars, and he's making a public statement that we're being led to slaughter, going against maybe what the other branches are wanting to do?
I think he has a duty to make things aware to the American people and where he wants to go with his policy. I just think that the rhetoric is really, really important here, and I think as a leader, he's going to have to recognize that some people are going to take those words verbatim and take that attitude and sentiments about what to do next verbatim from Trump. So I think it's really important. I don't have a problem with him sharing news like this or explaining where he wants to go with his administration, but he has to be careful about the words he
There's
chooses.
never been a president who hasn't shared their belief on what we should do with our military endeavors, whether it was through Twitter or not, whether it was before they were in office or not. I think every president has made known, what their intentions are. But to say that it undermines, that this is Congress's job, I don't think that's fair. I think it's still Congress's job, even if the president tweets something like that. The president's not going to tweet something and troops are going to get up and move. There still is a process and a procedure that's very much in place.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it undermines the political process. I think that tweet in particular was an emotional response to something that he didn't like. I liked your point about using particular words. I think he should be careful about the words that he uses when he is emotional, because sometimes it may come off to a lot of readers as attacking another person or another individual in office. And when you start attacking other individuals in Congress or in other branches, then it can become off as kind of undermining their power, and then it can start getting into what we were talking about, undermining the political process.
Last two questions. One, do you feel like with the president's approach with Twitter and social media platforms, that you guys are more in tune and connected with politics, that you're more up to date on them, especially as our generation? Or do you feel like that nothing's really changed based off of this social media and his use of Twitter?
I think it's hard not to be more in tune. You're getting a direct message from the President of the United States, and how often are we sitting on our phones going through social media? You're bound to come across it. I think a lot of times it gets taken out of context. So you'll see just a 160 character message and you don't get the full picture. And if you're not interested enough to do the extra research to figure out what's actually going on, you could have a confident impression of what's actually going on.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot I study economics, which deals a lot with politics, and I don't know if it's because of his presence on social media or if it's just me getting older or me just taking an interest in what I'm studying and I want to learn more about politics. It might be a combination of all three, but very often do I see tweets that get retweeted on my timeline because I don't personally follow him, and then I see responses, and then I see kind of how people feel about his tweets, and then that sort of gets me engaged. So I guess to answer your question, I would say his social media presence has pushed me more to learn about politics, like what exactly is the truth, what exactly is going on. It's kind of made me more aware of current events, so I'd say so.
For me personally, I'm really interested in politics, so it's usually not, Trump's tweets aren't usually the first time I'm hearing about some political event happening, but I think for a lot of people in the country that is true.
Yeah, and then last question. In class we talked a lot about Twitter and social media sites, and that you're giving up a lot of privacy in having this, and once you put something out there, you can delete it, but it's often out there for everyone to see. So based off of that information, how do you think, or what do you think is the best way for a politician to use Twitter or other social media sites going forward?
Carefully.
Carefully, just check your tweets. Make sure you're not just, attacking anybody or, being abrasive or brash or anything like that. I mean, I feel like Twitter should just be used in the most professional. Get your message out there. American people are mature. They can understand that you get emotional sometimes and that things get said, but just handle it responsibly is pretty much all I could ask for.
Understand that your audience is going to be similar in size to if you were at a big rally, and so speak as if you were at a big rally. Have that kind of professionalism, have that kind of energy and community engagement, and just general positivity, and understand that you're not sending a tweet to one person.
I don't know if he has any different rhetoric in his rallies or if he does in his tweets.
He doesn't, but he is a very unique
Yes,
case. He's
so-
a very unique case.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming and talking about this with us.
Sure.
Yeah, no worries. Enjoyed it.
With the help of our focus group panel discussion, we were able to sit down and get some real answers from some American voters. With these students, as you can see, we asked them a series of different questions. These questions were aimed at the tweets of President Donald Trump and whether or not the American people feel that his tweets affected the political process of the United States. Our focus group did give us answers that his tweets are a different way of President Trump being more connected with his constituents. Our group also shared that common theme that they did not believe that his tweets undermine the separation of powers between the different branches of government. However, they did all agree that his impulsive tweets do affect how his office is able to work, as they are constantly defending him. We've discussed a lot in class this year about new technology and data analytics and how important they are to us in everyday life, including politics. With this birth of technology and data collection, it is clear that President Trump feels as if he can reach more voters more quickly if he is using Twitter as opposed to traditional news source platforms. We have also discussed data collection a lot this semester in class, and it is very safe to say that the president follows trends based off of Twitter. With all of our tweets, our locations, our different followers who we're following, and the hashtags that are being collected and stored as a part of our digital profile, it is easy for the Trump team to learn from these trends, to get out messages to gain support of people based on how they interact with social media as a whole. In the end, many people, including those from our focus group, do not completely agree that his tweets undermine the political process, even though they do agree that many of his tweets could be stated in a more professional manner. Our panel discussion hopefully was able to clear up that some Americans do feel that Twitter is a great platform for our politicians to use as a whole, and they do not affect the voters' minds and the political process mind too much to change important day-to-day tasks of our government.